welcome to the Regional Roundup, the D2 football show where two guys reach across the Allegheny Mountains and bring you all the pertinent information about D2 football. And after a busy week last week, both Colin and I unfortunately couldn't find a half hour just because this time of year there's a lot going on. But this week we're back, and Colin, there's a lot to talk about. It's good to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, there's a lot of things. We've got our first set of regional rankings officially now to dive into. That's always interesting. And a couple of really marquee upsets I know I saw across my reach here in the MEC. Not totally sure about you, but we've got some important stuff to talk about.
Well, let's start with how this past weekend was. Now that we're into the part of the season where the regional rankings are starting to matter more, we're not going to go through every game and every standing and everything like that with every conference. I said every like 10 times there. So if you have that on your bingo card, you get a square. But we're going to talk quickly about two games that were insane. And the first, we're going to talk about the Coal Bowl, Cal and IUP, where Cal was probably down to a 0.1% chance of winning, and then a block kick with 40 seconds to go, and then a touchdown pass from Noah Mitchell to Tyson Hill with 17 seconds, and Cal got the win. And basically through every prediction about what was going to happen in the regional rankings, and also threw a wrench into people's predictions about the PSAC title picture and playoff picture. But Colin, I know you were watching, or at least keeping tabs on it. As a fan from afar, what was your first takeaway from that result?
Well, just towards the beginning of like the end of the first half, and I would see things, and I was just seeing like a 26-10 mark, and I was like, oh man, like I was hoping they were going to come out with a bit more fight. And then I went back to it because I was at Paramount State at that point in time. We were in the middle of a game against the Fighting Falcons, which you know a little bit about from earlier in the season. But, you know, by the end of the third quarter, I decided to check again. We were doing score updates from around the region, and I saw that and just was like, okay, they got a shot here. They're on the way back. And then I had no idea. I found out they won the game while I was sitting in a Chipotle on the way home because I hadn't looked at about 15 minutes. And I got a call from somebody and said, they did it. And I said, they did what? Oh, they won the Coal Bowl. I couldn't believe it. But what an amazing game.
Well, I tell you what, if given the choice of getting the results of a game anywhere, I think Chipotle would be my number one choice. But I saw Noah Mitchell, our quarterback, good friend of both of ours, after the game. And I said, as soon as Cal, you got the ball back with time on the clock, I knew at the very least he would lead the team to a field goal, at least a field goal attempt. But then that second down, there was a pass that covered about 35 yards, got us Cal U inside the 10-yard line, and then IUP called defense to set, or called a timeout to set their defense. Then, and we're going to show the highlight right now as I talk about it. Noah Mitchell throws a back shoulder pass to Tyson Hill that just was just filthy in how it was executed and won the game. But so that threw a lot into shaking up the regional rankings. But Colin, before we look at those, you were talking about another upset, another fantastic game across the region this past weekend.
Yeah, really, a lot of people have been putting focus on Charleston out of the Mountain East to possibly be a playoff contender, but I got to tell you, after last week, that might be a thing of the past because they traveled down to Pembroke, North Carolina to take on UNCP, and that's a game that they were really, everybody across the board was picking them to win. They thought things were going to go great for Charleston, and they would cruise on through and be in the playoff picture with one loss, but according to the Braves, they had another idea in mind as they stole that one at home on homecoming, 21-14 over Charleston. Shut them down. Now they're sitting right at the bottom of the regional rankings instead of within the top 7. They're sitting at 10th now after 2 losses.
Well, that's a great segue into the regional rankings. Let's talk about those regional rankings. This is the first regional ranking for 2021. And one of the great things about Division II football is all of the conjecture about what's going or who's going to be in the first regional rankings and where the teams are going to be ranked in. As we see on the screen right now, Bentley 1, Kutztown 2, Shepherd, Cal U, Notre Dame, New Haven, IUP, Slippery Rock, Stonehill, and Charleston. Personally, I think out of all the eligible teams, I think they got probably the right 10 teams. I'm not sure about the order.
The right ones are there. I agree with you on that one. But I'll tell you what, if the season ended today and you got that 4-5 matchup that you're looking at right now, that would be one heck of a contest at Adams Stadium. Notre Dame is a pretty impressive team. I mean, they come out with a pretty high-firing and fast-paced offense once they really get to know how you're going to attack them. And it's special. They're a great team, and we've seen them before make deep runs in Super Region 1, only to come up short a few times against teams like Slippery Rock and whatnot. But Should be a fantastic first round, depending on how things hold. I know it's going to be a couple weeks till we find out how things will actually shake up, but could be an interesting 4-5.
Yeah, and just as a reminder to fans who may not be as familiar with how the regional playoffs work, 7 teams get in, ranked by a committee. The number 1 team will get a bye, and then 2 will play 7, 3 will play 6, 4 will play 5. But just looking at the rankings, this is the first one. There's 3 weeks left in the regular season. Just looking right now, Cal plays Slippery Rock in 2 weeks, so that's going to possibly knock one team out or solidify a team. Or if Slippery Rock were to beat Cal, that would give Cal a loss. So Slippery Rock would have 1 loss, Cal would have 1 loss. So, and then I believe New Haven has a tough game, possibly against Stonehill. So those 2 teams will actually Stonehill and New Haven already played. So, but there's a lot. There's going to be some head-to-head matchups. Then with the PSAC title game, you could see a Kutztown play a Cal U, a Kutztown play a Slippery Rock. So really, a lot of de facto playoff games the next couple weeks. And I know there's some matchups in the MEC that can affect this.
Yeah, no, I'm going to throw it in here regardless, just because I want to mention it. We'll throw it up on the screen here. I've got a tweet from Chuck Bittner where he talked about where Frostburg State would sit in these regional rankings should they have been able to qualify, because it's the last year in their transition period from D3 to D2. But according to his knowledge and what he's looked at through this point in time, he thought they would be sitting at a healthy 6 right now. So I'll be keeping track of that just because it's nice to talk about across campus and whatnot. And people always ask, well, what do you think? Where would they be at this point in time? And I try to keep somewhat of a tab on it often, but you can see there on that graphic a couple of good things and what they thought they might think about. But I'll keep tabs on it. But you're definitely right. MEC is going to be very interesting coming up here. And I'll tell you what, the one thing that really surprised me about this, we're not seeing a single GMAC team on here.
Well, I know that this past weekend there was an upset, and I can't think about off the top of my head because my tab is off the screen, but this could be a year where there's no GMAC team represented. Remember, there's no automatic qualifier for conference champions. So basically, a GMAC team would need to hold serve the next couple weeks and then hope that, teams 5 through 10, or at least 5 through 9 in that ranking kind of have some troubles in the next 2 weeks. But getting back to your point about Frostburg, what I like about that, just Chuck's tweet about where the Bobcats would be, is that's something to look at going into next year when they are fully eligible for the playoffs and everything that comes with being a full D2 member. Because, I mean, we've talked about it on the show. We've talked about it just in our normal conversations. Frostburg's a team on the rise, and they're going to be, I think, a regional force in the not-too-distant future.
It's a fun brand of football down here. It's been a lot of fun, and the special teams is amazing. I have seen more blocked kicks, blocked punts, blocked field goals than I've seen probably in 4.5 years of a career doing broadcasting here in just one season alone. They're pretty special down here, and I'm sure people will enjoy the more they find out about it. They're going to put some people on notice next year.
And I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing a Cal U Frostburg matchup in the near future, just because it's a short trip and it would just be fun. But I mean, that could be a potential playoff matchup in the future. You never know. But switching over from the regional rankings, that's the most important thing. But it's always fun to talk about the national rankings. There's several teams in Super Region 1 that are represented. And as I slide down past the FCS poll to the D2 poll, Fair State, Valdosta State, they've been 1-2 for a while. But Cal U sneaking up with that big win into 4th, one of the highest ranks Cal U has ever achieved in school history. And then you scroll down, Notre Dame's number 9, Bentley 11, Shepherd 12, Bowie State, which is not in the PS or not in Super Region 1, but they're in Maryland, an adjacent region. And actually, they were in the region for a while, the CIAA. Sleepy Rock at 15. And then Kutztown at 21. And then a little team, something about the Frostburg State Bobcats coming in at 23 and dropping out IUP after that loss. But receiving votes, you have Charleston. So Super Region 1 and New Haven's also receiving votes. But Super Region 1 getting some national love in the coaches poll.
I'll tell you what, Cal U stands to move up one more spot next week, depending on how the 2-3 matchup between Valdosta State and West Georgia goes down on Saturday. They have a chance to hop up to number 3 next week as long as they take care of business against Seton Hill on Saturday. So I'll definitely be keeping tabs on that 2-3 matchup. And
that 2-3 matchup might be possibly one of the top 3 biggest games in any division of NCAA football, 1 FCS 2 or Division 3, because it's not often you see, especially in Division 2, where there's not a lot of cross-regional or cross-divisional matchups. You don't see a lot of top 5 matchups this late in the season. So for Valdosta State and West Georgia to be locking horns this weekend is something special. But Colin, let's talk about some schedules. We'll look first at the PSAC since I have that tab up. I'm not going to go through every matchup, and really there's not a lot. There's not, I don't think, any matchups that are going to cause any chaos in the region. A lot of top of the table teams playing some bottom of the middle of the table. But just looking, the one that possibly would be Shippensburg and East Stroudsburg, both teams kind of hovering around the top part. But that's probably my pick for a game of the week in the PSAC. How about you?
Well, I mean, looking at the slate here for the Mountain East, I mean, there's a few things that I've seen that look okay that are going to be entertaining. I mean, Concord and Wheeling should be a fun one. Not really going to have any kind of implications or any kind of standings to play with here, but really the main one that needs to be looked forward to is not until next week, and that will be when Notre Dame travels down to UNC Pembroke, and we'll see if the Braves can get another high-ranked team with some home cooking here, maybe knock them out and knock them down a peg in the region, as well as take them out of the tie for first place in the Mountain East Conference standings.
Yeah, and it's crazy we're at this point in the season just because the fall goes so fast. Now I'm going to switch over to the Northeast 10, the game of the week, and this could have some implications depending on how certain things shake out in the next 2 or 3 weeks in other conferences and other games. But Assumption will be traveling to New Haven. Assumption right behind New Haven in the Northeast 10 standings, and that is going to be a game that, we look. New Haven is 6-1 overall; they're 5-0 in conference. Assumption 4-3, so they're out pretty much out of the playoff NCAA playoff discussion. But if they get a win, that could, in fact, possibly eliminate New Haven, because I'm not sure if the Northeast 10 will be able to get 2 teams in.
I was surprised to see Stonehill hanging around towards the bottom of those initial regional rankings. I mean, I saw 5-2, and I immediately thought, wow, I didn't even think they would even have a shot to be hanging around. But they're still in play. You never know.
Yeah, and I believe that was on the strength of, and I'm going to pull the schedule up right now, I believe they played New Haven this past weekend. Yes, New Haven beat Stonehill 42-20, but possibly that could be one of those weird, because they played New Haven with a pretty good strength of schedule, that could have bumped them up even with a loss. That's what another weird thing, and I think that's one of the things we've been hearing on campus from various people that don't really look into how the rankings are accumulated. Cal's 5-0, but they're 5-0, 7-0. I'm a couple weeks behind, but the strength of schedule is not very good. Nothing they can do about the conference mandated schedule. Just got unlucky a little bit with playing Lock Haven and Millersville, 2 teams that are struggling, but also Slippery Rock having that same issue with strength of schedules issue. So that's why I'm thinking that game between Slippery Rock and Cal in 2 weeks, or a week and a half really, could be a de facto playoff game, because there's no guarantee that a 1-loss Cal U team or a 1-loss Slippery Rock team would get into the NCAA playoffs.
And you always have to watch it on the east side of things. I mean, Shepherd and Kutztown both really being possible contenders out there on that side of things. And their matchup was fantastic. I don't think anybody saw the outcome of that one going the way that it did. But still, 2 guys you're going to have to watch out for over there on that other side. Well,
and really, I tell you what, Kutztown is probably playing the steadiest ball of anybody in the Super Region 1 right now, just because, I mean, they had that one blip earlier in the year. Not even a blip. It was, they lost to a good team. But they have been – there's never been a week that I've said, oh, Kutztown's going to lay an egg here. They've just been very, very solid. And then quickly I'm going to look over to the GMAC. Even though they don't have any teams ranked, it's always good to see what's going on. Really no marquee matchups this week, which is,
it could have been.
Could have been a couple. There could have been a couple, but unfortunately, Ohio Dominican had a loss. Tiffin did not have the season we'd all expected. They play this week. Finley at Walsh. Walsh not having a good season, so kind of a down year for the GMAC, and a couple of their top teams cannibalizing each other, and that happens. And it happens when you have conferences that have a lot of parity.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a bunch of good teams towards the top of there, and they'll just beat up on each other. We've seen it year in and year out over there. Sometimes you'll have one that makes their way through, and times like this year, everybody just kind of knocks each other out.
And Colin, before we leave, let's get Colin's crazy prediction. We talked about everything good, but if there's anything crazy that could happen this week, what are you putting your money on?
Well, I know last time we did a little bit of a segment like this, I said there was a possibility that Notre Dame could lose to Charleston, and I ended up losing back there. So I really got some big shoes to fill here. But I guess if I had to look across the schedule in general, just the different things you could see, I mean, maybe Fairmont could potentially run with Notre Dame if they can really hold on to the football and get the run game going, because they struggled to run the ball against Frostburg last week. But I mean, you never know. If you can play the time of possession game and really just control that football, you never know. You might have a chance here. They do struggle a bit to throw the football. They were down to their fourth string QB last week, but it's a team that could surprise people. You never know. They've been back and forth all year, and it just seems like a thing where they could go on the road and maybe pull an upset. But that's all I can really think of now.
And I'm actually going to cheat. I'm going to pick two, and the first one's going to be they're both in the Northeast 10 that are going to throw major. If these happen, these are going to throw major wrenches into what is going to happen next week in the regional rankings. But the first, I'm going to say Assumption is going to upset New Haven. Just based, you've seen Assumption, you've been to Assumption, so that's my one pick. And then I'm going to pick Franklin Pierce shocking the world at Bentley. Franklin Pierce not having a great season, but we said crazy, and I'm going to go crazy. And if that were to happen, that would throw just chaos. And it's always good to have chaos this time of year when it's talking playoffs.
Oh, I couldn't imagine it shake everything up and probably boost Kutztown up to number one. And that's where they were at the end of 2019. If you can remember back that far, they did finish at the top of the region.
Well, Colin, we're at the end of our time, but tell everybody where they can catch you in Frostburg State football this weekend.
Frostburg State on the road this week at Alderson Broadus down in Philippi, West Virginia. First time going there. A small 2,000-seat football stadium, a multi-sport performance center, I think or stadium, I should say, the name of that, and it'll be an interesting one. I've seen more Alderson Broadus this week than most people have in a lifetime. Soccer against them yesterday, volleyball on Tuesday, and then we'll have football on Saturday, looking to go for a clean slate, beat them every single one. So 99.5 WBZN Cumberland, that's where we'll be. Pre-game at 12:45, as always, for a 1 p.m. kickoff.
You may have to pay some local taxes in Philippi this week, seeing as much Battler athletics as you have in the past week. But for us on CUTV and CalU, you will be able to watch the CalU Seton Hill contest this Saturday at 4 o'clock from Addison Stadium, and that game will be live on CUTV Sports 1 and also on the CalU portal on the PSAC network. So that wraps up the regional roundup for this week. So for Colin Kirkwood, I'm Gary Smith saying we'll see you next week for some more playoff predictions and getting into the final 2 weeks of the regular season.